Righto, in this episode, it's all about making a start with the electronics for Mistress. First of which is the through-hole transducer, primarily for the depth sounder. However, it's a DST transducer, meaning that it will provide depth, speed, and temperature readings as well, which is fantastic to get all of those things in one transducer. Now, as with everything with boats, you want to do one simple thing, like, for example, install a transducer in a location, but wait till you see the rigmarole that I had to go through in order to not only install the transducer, but in order to get the cable run in a way that protects it and hides it, just to get it out of eye shot. And pretty much with this, what it does mean is that most of the older clips I've now put together in episodes that you've seen, and so looking ahead, we're getting much more up to date. Things do take time though, as I said. With installing this transducer, that did cover some months, which I hope that most people now fully understand. And so with that, here I am in front of this old post-it notes list, and I can cross off and remove 6 of these things, which are now done. So with that said, here we go. Fit the gas line sensor unit, etc. Done. Connect the heads plumbing. Done. Fit the holding tank. Done. Buy and fit the anchor locker rubber. Done. Make the V-berth 2 lockers and shelves. Done. And lastly, fitting the hard dodger and getting it undercoated. So that is also now done, and it does give me a little reward to pull these off and relegate them. Done. As always, if you like this episode, I'd appreciate a like. It'd be great to have you on board as a subscriber, clicking the bell so that you get the notifications for things that will come out ahead, and leave a comment, because I do enjoy reading what you've got to say. On with the episode. Well, 2 days ago, I was on the road doing a loop down through Brisbane, dropping into places there, down to the Gold Coast, 3 places down there, collecting some rather expensive electronic equipment and paints, and parting with quite a bit of money, which is always noticeable and causes a little bit of pain as it bleeds out. But part of the packages that I was getting from Trimax, the electrical place down there that I've gone to get all of this gear, and what I did decide was to go for a Raymarine package. And so what that's amounted to is their wind and depth instruments, the radar, AIS, and one of their new generation Axiom MFD plotters. So I haven't collected all of it, but what I have got here is the transducer, which needs to go through the hole, and that's what I want to talk about now. The rest of the package is called an I-70 transducer package with some other stuff as well, the NMEA connectivity and some other bits and pieces that go with that. And so in regards to all of the wind instrumentation, and more particularly the actual cabling that needs to go through the mast, whilst I was down on the Gold Coast, I've dropped all of that off to the rigger, Cookie, so that he can run all that cabling through the mast. There's also the whip aerial and the cable, and a couple of other bits and pieces, and the other cables which have to do with this i7 package. So he's got all that, and what I've got here is the transducer which needs to go through the hull, which means of course I need to put a hole in Mistress's hull just forward of the keel, and so I'm going to be talking a bit about that. And of course why that's really important is we're getting very close to needing to go down to the boatyard, but before we do that of course I've got to get the hull all undercoated again, and I want that hole in the hull so that I can get the undercoat on that at the same time and be completely prepared to put that transducer in place, probably on the day that Mistress is going to be going to the water. So that's all the gear for the transducer in here and some spare parts. It comes with the main fitting, which actually has to go through the hull to hold the transducer itself in place. That's connected to its own cabling, of course. A transducer with a paddle wheel on the end there. They also put a plug there which they advise if you're going to be in cold climates where you winterize your boat to remove the transducer itself, and you can put that plug in, and part of the reason is so that all water is bled from that transducer socket so that there's no frozen water there putting pressure on the plastics. So what we'll do now is head forward into the V-berth there. In following the instructions, I've located an ideal spot, so we'll go up there and I'll show you where that's going to be located. So the instructions say that the transducer on a keel boat like Mistress with a fin keel should be 300 to 600 millimeters forward of the front of the keel and as close to the centre line as possible. And that's why I've got this location here. And of course, because of the shape of the hull, which is complex curves, I will need to make somewhat of a base plate on the outside of the hull so that I can get the transducer to sit vertically, pointing straight down to get accurate readings right beneath Mistress. I haven't exactly decided what I'm going to make that out of. Of all the things I've considered, I think either a plastic or fiberglass block that'll hold that transducer nice and vertical will be the option. Something that I can bond to the epoxy paint system on the outside of the hull. And obviously there's all the seals as part of that package so that no water comes inside. Sealant will be used as well, of course, so that there's no leaking. The next step for that through-hull transducer, now that I've got the hole in place, got some etch primer on that to protect it, is, as you can imagine, a boat having a shape at the bow, or any place in the hull for that matter, that is not completely horizontal. I did have a good talk with the guys who supplied all of this Raymarine equipment that I've got about how much does it matter that that transducer is both horizontal in the athwartships plane and also in the fore-aft plane. I thought it might have been okay if it was sloping forward a little bit, maybe that was useful, but they explained to me because it's got a 40-degree beam, the most accurate readings or soundings that the sensors can provide is when they can shoot straight down. So for that matter, I needed to think about how I was going to get that transducer socket to be orientated vertically so that it can shoot straight down. Of course, with a boat, the hull is anything but horizontal pretty much anywhere on the boat. So I did design a spacer, and I've had that made up so that that transducer can be vertically in both planes. And this is the end result. It's made out of acetal. Each piece, as you can see, has got a tapered cut, and that's actually to take into account the angle of the hull, fore and aft, and athwartships. So one of those needs to be glued to the bottom of the hull and the other on the inside of the hull, and then that transducer will be able to slot down inside of there and be vertical. In looking online at what can actually bond to acetal and really stick to it, good old epoxy glue is pretty much the #1 recommended glue to bond that, and it will bond to this epoxy coating that I've got on the steel hull. So that's the next thing. I'll get one of those on the bottom epoxied in place, and then the other one on top. And just to add, because these are a circle, when it comes to below the waterline on the hull there, I think that makes quite a hydrodynamic shape. I've actually got that made up with a machining guy so that there's minimal amount at the narrowest point, so that on the bottom of Mistress really won't cause any significant drag at all. That will be completely negligible in my opinion. So I don't think I need to do any other shaping for that. Once that's in place, I think the water will run around that quite easily. For those with experience, you will understand why, yet again, Mistress is kind of being pulled apart a bit. And for those who haven't built a boat or had to do the work of upgrading or doing some boat work, to explain that there is something unique to boats, that whenever you want to do something, often it can be the smallest of things. It involves pulling a whole heap of the boat apart just to be able to get to things to get the work done. And so here we are yet again, Mistress pulled apart. There is stuff everywhere at the moment, and the reason for that is because I'm needing to run electrical cables and get the final finished plumbing work all set up, which, as I say, invariably involves needing to pull a lot of things apart just to do some simple things like drilling holes so that I can run these cables or conduit and pipes. With that through-hull transducer, obviously the cabling itself needs to run somewhere, and on looking at my complete electronic setup, what I have decided is that the main distribution area where that's going to be mounted will be in the navigation area, which for obvious reasons makes sense. So that transducer cable needs to make its way from right up in the V-berth on the hull there back to the navigation area. I've had to drill holes in bulkheads, in some other bits of timber, and also needed to go through the heads cabinet. And of course, as is my choice, I do want to protect everything with epoxy if I'm drilling holes. So that takes days, 3 days in fact, getting 3 coats of epoxy on all of those holes, which is now done. So I'll show you what I've done, and which now means that I can actually run that conduit and cabling and get it back to the navigation area where it'll be all connected up to the Raymarine system. So it all starts with where the transducer goes through the hole. Obviously we're in the V-berth here, That transducer is sited there in the hull. From there, the cabling will be going underneath the cabin sole, and then will come up into this cabinet about at that corner there, where I've got a hole sited right in that corner there, where it goes into the saloon area through that bulkhead. That hole is there. From there, the conduit with the cabling will be running along the bottom of this storage area. Hole in that divider, divider 1 and then divider 2, continues along. We'll do a little bit of a turn in order to make its way to this hole here, which is in the main bulkhead in the saloon here, creating the heads area. We go into the heads, which is as untidy and unruly with stuff everywhere as everywhere else at the moment. That cabling will pass into the top of this cabinet here. You can see that hole. It'll then run along the top of this cabinet area, where it goes through a collection of holes that I've put into the top here, and that's to accommodate plumbing hosing as well as 2 electrical cable conduits. And another hole I had to put in was into this shelf in order to be able to run the electrical cables to the bilge pump and the shower sump. This is the collection of holes, so the plumbing pipes 1 and 2, and then notches there to accommodate the conduit for the electrical cables. From there, they'll run up this lining along the top, which then puts it into the navigation area. Once we're in the navigation area, obviously we can get power, earth everything, and then the main controlling area for the raymaring equipment I'll be mounting on this lining panel somewhere. So there you go. Mistress pulled apart again for, I would have no idea how many times that's been, and I'm sure it won't be the last. And I've heard it said before, which I think is really, really appropriate, which is in a boat, one that you can actually sleep and cook and toilet in, you're basically needing to set up a small town all in the tiny confines of whether it be 35, 40, 45, 50 feet. This is what you're doing. You're trying to provide all those services in the confined space of a small boat. Now it's time to run this cable through the hidden kind of bows behind all the cabinetry. So this transducer is what's called a DST 800. It's Raymarine's latest one. The DST stands for depth, speed and temperature. There is another function that you can add to this, which can give a whole lot of boat movement information. I really don't think I need that, especially with a sailing boat, given that it's going to be constantly moving around. These type of older transducers pretty much just did the depth as a sounder, but it's handy that those 3 senders are all in the one unit, giving all of that information. So now what I'll do, I'll just unroll this cable, and then it's going to be put inside of this conduit to protect it over time, and then I can get it run through where it needs to go. In place and now ready for the pre-launch boat work.